Hey, folks, happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of Plan A Conversations. How's your week going? How's the summer headed for you? I know a lot of you listeners have sent me messages about the summer's winding down. You know, you really want to be able to just savor those last few days of summer. And so I really hope that you're able to do that as we move to September. Also, want to thank you guys for your DMs and your messages over the last couple of weeks. I love all your feedback, love all your comments. And again, this podcast is supportive of wherever you want to figure out your purpose and calling in life. And you also want to understand some of those mechanisms that hold you back from living more purposefully. This is what this podcast is here for. So continue to send all your questions and your feedback, and I will guarantee we'll continue to make sure that you are at the helm of the intention why I do this podcast. And so shifting gears to today's podcast episode, I'm so incredibly excited to speak to the gentleman who is in front of you if you are our visual audience, and also for our audio audience, the voice you will hear. Let me just welcome him. Scott Shute, welcome to today's conversation.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. So good to be here.
Yeah, I am so incredibly excited and stoked to have a conversation with you, Scott, for a couple of reasons. I saw that you were on Thank God for Mondays. I was on that show maybe 2 years ago and had an incredible conversation with the host there. But then, Scott, I read a little bit about your bio being the head of mindfulness and compassion at LinkedIn. And
That's
I
right.
have to, yeah, I have to tell you, my mind was blown because 16 years ago, when I started this whole work with having, purposeful pursuits and bringing them to corporate world, I was told that this is not a handheld babysitting service. No one is interested in this work. And then to see you in this space, I was like, I have to talk to him. I have to talk to him.
Yeah. Things have changed. Things have changed. We still have work to do, but things have changed.
Yeah, things have changed. So let's get into actually what that change has been like for you.
Sure.
Had you always saw yourself in the mindfulness and compassion space in your life and your career? How did
Well,
we actually get there?
I'll give you a little bit of background. So at LinkedIn, I've been at LinkedIn for 9 years. The first 6 of those, I was the VP of Global Customer Operations, right? So I had this career as an executive doing customer service and customer operations functions. And in parallel, since I was 13, I've had a spiritual practice, a meditation or a contemplation practice. I've been teaching since I was in college, and it's been a huge part of my life ever since. But it's not something I ever talked about in the workplace until I got to LinkedIn. About 2 years in, so about 7 years ago, I realized, wow, this place is so open. It's so amazing. Our CEO is talking about his own meditation practice. And I thought maybe it's a place where I could bring some of my practice to work because it's been really powerful and useful for me. And I just wanted to be able to share that with other people. And so I started 6 or 7 years ago just by leading one meditation session. It was on a Thursday afternoon at 4:30 in the heavenly conference room, which I thought was very auspicious. And that first time, there was only one dude there, and I'm sure that I'm sure he was just as terrified as I was. I don't think I ever saw him again. But the next week there were 3, and then there were 5, and then it became a regular thing. And then people knew I did it, so I'd get invited to these bigger events. Like the CFO would have a summit of finance people, and I would kick it off, in front of 200 or 300 people with a meditation session and things like that. And I volunteered to be our executive sponsor of our mindfulness program. We didn't really have one. So myself and a bunch of volunteers created one. And then 3 years ago, for me, this was the tipping point. Our CEO at the time, Jeff Weiner, was giving the commencement address at Wharton. And he talked about compassion. Basically, you get your 15 minutes to give your best piece of advice, right, in a commencement address. And he was saying, look, if you're going to be successful in life or successful at work, you got to be compassionate. And he told his own story. And I was thinking, okay, it's time. It's time for me to invest in this because it just was. I just knew in my heart that it was time. But it was also time for LinkedIn because essentially our CEO is out in the world telling our 15 or 16,000 employees that compassion's the most important thing they could do. What does that even mean? Right. So I made a pitch to him and to head of HR, and essentially 3 years ago created this role with their great support. And we can dive into, what does it actually mean? But that's how we got here.
Yeah, as actually, then my next question to you, for a lot of our listeners, we have all these words being thrown around:
Hmm.
authenticity, resilience, and a lot. And it means different things for different people. So, for
Hmm.
you, what does mindfulness and compassion mean for you, and where do they intersect in your work?
Sure. So, two parts to my job: mainstream mindfulness and operationalized compassion. And they fit together, but they're different. So, mindfulness is about the development of self. And another way you could say it is awareness, self-awareness, or awareness of, the broader world around me. And then compassion is how we work with other people, because we don't live or work in isolation. We work with other people. So that's how that happens. So let's talk about what it means at work. So, mindfulness, development of self, we offer lots of programs. It's everything from workshops on building resilience. Um, it could be meditation sessions. We offer meditation sessions all over the world, drop in community groups that have discussions. We have a speaker series. We give everybody access to an app. We love the one called Wise at Work from our friends at Wisdom Labs, because it's built for people who are working, right? It makes it relevant for the situations that we're going through. And then every year we do a 30-day challenge to get people to use the app. And the challenge is use the app 20 times within the month of October usually. And if you do, you get a free hoodie. And I guess, what I would say is never underestimate the power of a free hoodie on human
Right.
behavior. We had, 1,000 people complete the challenge last year.
Yeah.
Um, and so we're just trying to make mindfulness or meditation or this idea just mainstream, just as normal as physical exercise. And then the other part, compassion, I think this is where the juice is, because in business, because this is actually how we operate.
Right.
So let me first define compassion in the way I define it. There's lots of good definitions, but in three ways. It's the capacity to have awareness of others, a mindset of wishing the best for them, and then the courage to take action. So that often happens at the interpersonal level. That's the easiest to see. Klay, if you're having a rough day and I step in and do something, that's what we see as compassion. But when we talk about operationalizing compassion, this can happen at the company level. Meaning, think about your customers in the same three ways. Do we have awareness of them? Do we really know our customers? And then a mindset of kindness or a mindset of wishing the best for them. Do we really know what's best for our customers, or are we just selling something to them? And then the third part, this is the hard part, is the courage to take action.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to do things for our customers that aren't great for us as a company in the short term, but we know that over the long term, this will pay off because the customers will be more loyal. We will truly meet their needs. So, as an example, our head of sales will stand in front of 5 or 6,000 salespeople at sales kickoff and say something like, look, our job is to provide long-term value for our customers. So don't sell something they don't need at the end of the quarter just so you can hit your quota. This is how it shows up, kind of in real life. So
Right.
there's kind of the smattering of the development of self, which then honestly leads to the development of the organization.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, it's something that I think a lot more companies need to engage in. And it's something that they need to take more leadership in. And so, what do you say to people who are listening to this podcast who are in positions where they really want to bring mindfulness and compassion to their workplace? They're getting a lot of resistance in order to do that. But they feel, especially now, post pandemic, while in the pandemic, that it's a necessity for them as an individual to flourish in the workplace.
Sure. And maybe we'll break it into both the mindfulness and compassion pieces. It's two different things. So if we think about mindfulness, development of self, development of the workforce, in today's world, employees have never had so much influence or importance in a company, right? If we step back and think about the overall history of work, right? In the really old days, or not that old of days, the agrarian age, like the building of the pyramids, we had kings and slaves, right? Not good for the workers. In the industrial age, and all of us were building the same thing in a factory, we're just viewed as cogs in a machine. In neither case were workers treated or honored very well, right? But in today's world, in the information age, among companies who are information companies, like at LinkedIn and other places, we don't have hard goods. We don't have hard assets. All we have is information, which means that our number one asset, sometimes our only asset, is the people that work at the company, the employees. So it should be that your number one investment as a company is in the people, right? And here's the thing: people are struggling, right? Our collective mental wellness is not great. The numbers will bear this out. The CDC tells us that a third of Americans in any given week are suffering from symptoms of anxiety or depression. A third. 83% are suffering from emotional burnout, right? Feeling emotionally drained. And for me, most scary, 1 in 9 Americans in the last 30 days seriously considered taking their own life, right? So you put these things together, right? Employees are our number one resource, and employees are struggling. We all are struggling with our mental wellness. Anything we can do to boost mental wellness is a great investment. Now, take that for the mindfulness stuff. This stuff is not expensive. It doesn't have to cost anything, in fact, if you leverage your volunteers. But it works, right? I see it all the time. It works. You know, we had, I mentioned we do this 30-day challenge every year. And last year, the numbers were pretty powerful. Among the people who actually use the app for, I think 100 minutes over the course of the month, among those people, from their self-scores before and after, the number of people who said they were totally stressed, and felt imbalanced, that number was reduced by half. And the number of people who said that they felt a high degree of calm and they felt balanced and they had low stress, that number more than doubled, 105% increase. This stuff works.
It does.
It really works.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to even when I translated all this work and left my seminary, finished my seminary career at Princeton, and then brought a lot of these principles to the workforce, whether it was not for profit or in corporate. And the number one pushback that I always received was, "This stuff doesn't work. People are not
Mm,
interested in it."
mm.
And to your point about having that courage and action to actually speak up and say, "This is something that I really need as a person," and to know that the employees have a lot of the power is something that I think a lot of us really need to think about in terms of leveraging, the way in which we want our world to be, especially in the
That's right.
workforce.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Um, and here's another thing for employers. When I talk to people, when I talk to leaders, and you see it on on the front of every store in America right now. What's it say? It says "Help Wanted," right? People, both at coffee shops and restaurants, but also at big companies, they can't get the people that they need, right? And at the same time, 56% of American workers are actively spending time looking for their next role.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. So my guess is that those 56% are all going to find the next place where the company or the manager will invest in them, right? It's not rocket science. Like, this is a huge trend that we're going through. It only makes sense for companies to invest.
It does. I was just reading this morning in on Inc.com, the Great Resignation. It's here
Yeah,
in ways in which we've never thought about before. And the top three things are about burnout and about mental health and people seeing their life differently post pandemic. And which leads me to my next question. What do you think are going to be the top things that companies need to make sure their employees have as we navigate a whole new world construct post
sure.
COVID-19?
Sure. I will talk about it from a mental wellness perspective because we could go all kinds of places in, physical spaces and all that. From a mental wellness place, I think there's three things that have a huge impact. And maybe we start from the bottom up. In this world where we feel disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from each other, we've been through this division, right? Companies can actually help us first by helping ourselves build our mental wellness by offering things like mindfulness programs or access to therapy at scale. Companies like Ginger or Lyra or Talkspace, and more companies are doing these things. and also talking openly about it. So if a CEO or a leader acknowledges their own challenges, right? Not in a way that, nobody wants to hear about your messy divorce, right? But but just to acknowledge, like, we're all going through something hard, including me, the leader,
Right.
right? It allows for the rest of us in the organization to then, have some sort of dialogue that says, hey, when you ask me how I'm doing, I'm like, yeah, dude, to be honest, like, not great today. And then we can have a real conversation, right? And maybe we can help each other get the help that we need. So creating this safe space, that's one, is to help us with our mental well-being. A second one, which is interesting, is that companies can help us connect to each other, right? We've had the division of the red and the blue and the black and brown and the white and all of the other, the mask wearers and not mask wearers. We've had all this division. But inside a company, all of the flavors of the rainbow are inside of a team or inside of a company. And when we're all working towards the same thing, we tend to see each other in our similarities versus focusing so much on our differences. And so, what does that mean for a company? Anything we're doing that builds connection between employees and builds kind of a sense of, wow, we're all in it together, can help heal that broader division. And then there's something even higher, right? There's connecting to self, connecting to each other. Then there's connecting to something higher, connecting to purpose. So companies who choose to say, we exist for more than just making money, right? We exist to serve the whole, to exist to serve society. By the way, this is a better business strategy too. I'll talk in a minute how you make more money doing that way. But
Right.
but companies who talk about that, they talk about how we serve our customers, how we make the world a better place, instead of just talking about how we're going to be the next $1 billion, $10 billion company. Here's what happens at the employee level. We start to look around, we start to look up and go, wow, I'm proud to work here because my company is trying to change the world. We're doing something for good, which means that my work matters. It means that my life matters, right? 1 in 9 Americans the last 30 days thought about taking their own life. So these companies have a huge part to play in not just getting stuff done and getting us back to work, but in actually healing the stuff that's going on at the individual, but also at the societal level.
And I love that because so many people have said to me throughout my course of just being a coach and a speaker, people should not bring their personal life into the workplace. And right now, it's like actually, it seems to be a benefit when we can bring our full and our whole self to the workplace.
Absolutely.
What do you say to people who have the stigma of shame when they're going through stuff at home and they're trying to make heads or tails of, going to work and bringing it to work? How do we make sense of sort of letting go of that shame and knowing we're all
Hmm.
kind of in this together, as you just said?
Yeah. I think it's finding the right balance, right? Like I said, nobody wants to hear about your messy divorce, right?
Right.
We want to hear that you're going through something and that we want to be there for you. But at every meeting, we don't need to spend 12 minutes talking about the messy breakup that you're going through. So it's finding this nice balance of, but I am going through something. And I need to be able to, like, if you ask me how I'm doing, if you're my friend too, right? Like we're building relationship. I need to be able to tell you some of what's going on, right? So that we can connect on that. And collectively, one of a manager's job now is to kind of the care and feeding of the flock too. It's get the work done, but also make sure that everybody's okay. And part of that okay is checking in. And in some cases, it's say, hey man, like, do you need more than my help? Right? I'm willing to chat with you, but I'm not a professional. So can I offer you these set of resources where you can get your help? But none of that happens if we can't have the conversation, right? And none of that healing happens until you can't heal what you don't feel, right?
Right.
So it starts with acknowledging ourselves, and it starts with being able to be a little bit open to go, yeah, I'm going through stuff right now, and I could use some help. Is how can you help me? Like, is there a way?
Right. And so, even just shifting gears to that interpersonal spiritual journey, you spoke about being a younger individual when this idea of
Yeah.
mindfulness, spirituality came to you.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we help our audience understand that this is a journey. It's not something that just happens overnight. You're
That's
evolved,
right.
you have this level of inertia inside of you. It really is a practice and a journey. So, walk us through what that was like for you as a young adult,
Mm.
and how did you find that path?
Mm. So for me, so I'll preface it by saying everything we do at work is completely secular, right? I've found a language to use that is inclusive, regardless of your belief system and how you believe the world works. And my own journey has been a spiritual one. So I grew up in a certain path. I grew up on a farm in Kansas, and we went to this little country church. And but there was something about it which didn't quite match what I felt inside. And my I'm the youngest of five. One of my older brothers was touring America trying to make a living as a rock star, and and had come home. And long story short, he had found a different spiritual path. And for me, it was really powerful. It was what I had been looking for. It felt like what I'd been looking for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and I'd finally kind of come home to my own truth of it. I'm not here. And I say my truth, right? Everybody, I believe that everybody has their own worldview that fits them, or should. And so for me, that practice, and part of it was a practice of going within and essentially developing a practice of tapping into that deepest part of me. You can call that whatever you want. Um, but that, I mean, to be honest, it kind of saved my life as a teenager, going through a rough teenage time, and at one particularly dark time, contemplating harming myself as well. It was this practice, it was this knowing that there's more, that kept me alive. And beyond that, allowed me to thrive as a young adult, but as an adult in very, just like everybody else in today's pressured world. And for me, in big jobs with a family, this practice has helped me stay centered and in tune with that deepest part of myself, and has helped me, I guess, be a better version of myself every day.
And what does that practice entail to
Yeah.
just be supportive of what that is for you?
Sure. It's a going within, it's a contemplation practice that's, I try for 20 minutes a day, sometimes less, sometimes more. It's a number of different things, but one of the things I do is I use a mantra. I use a sound-based mantra that I sing out loud. And for me, I do lots of different things, but the one I appreciate most is, I use the word hue. Like some people use the word om, I use the word hue, H-U, sung long and drawn out. You sing for 10 or 15 minutes, and then it's a period of silence for 5 or 10 or more minutes of just listening. It's like I've I've sung this, let's call it love song to the universe, and then I get quiet and I listen to see what the universe has to say back to me.
Hmm. And what has been sort of your greatest reward from having this spiritual practice, or one of your greatest rewards?
Yeah. Um, I think it's about peace. It's about, ultimately, the word is love, right? I think love is a proxy. It's another way of saying the divine. But I'll speak for myself. When I have that feeling of peace, that feeling of joy, that feeling of love, all of the other stuff, the chatter of the mind, slides away in, back, right? It reduces my anger, it reduces my frustration, it reduces my anxiety, and it's replaced with this kind of warm love, which is, just this feeling of strength, the feeling of I am fine just the way I am. I'm great just the way I am.
And isn't it amazing that we then show up differently in our
Absolutely.
relationships at work and things like that? I don't think people really understand like the power of that. So many people, pastors, rabbis, spiritual teachers, and thought leaders, they'll say, "This is what I call being in flow," with the world, where things just start to fall in place and things like
That's right.
that in general. What do you say to people who are afraid to develop a spiritual practice because it's not something that's been in their family
Mm,
statement of origin? It's not something that
mm,
their partner or their familial relationship is supportive of. There's something within them that they know is there, but they're
yeah.
afraid to dig deeper.
Oh, wow. You know, feel the fear and do it anyway, I guess. The rewards are gigantic, and you don't have to follow anybody else's path. Find your own path, your own dynamic relationship with the thing, whatever you want to call it. God, the universe, the thing, the divine. You decide what you want to call it and meet it on your own terms. Because each one of us, there's whatever, 7 billion of us on the planet. There are 7 billion different states of consciousness. And
Yes.
each one of us has a different relationship with that thing. And so go to the deepest part within you and say, what does that want? Because that's it, right? It's like you're trying to experience you at the deepest level, beyond the mind, beyond the emotions, beyond the body. Who are you? And I
Preach.
think the journey to answering that question is fascinating.
It
And
is.
here's the deal. The closer you get to that, everything else gets better, right? You get better at your job, you get better at your relationships, you get better at being human, you get better at reducing your emotions, the ones that aren't healthy. You get stronger, you get like all of it.
And for me, the great realization that I've seen is we judge other people's experiences less. It
Hmm,
doesn't become about who they are or what they're doing. It becomes more so about why they're so great because they just exist. They're here. And we start
that's
to
right.
see them, not as a value, but just because their significance, their presence, they're here.
That's right.
Scott, one thing that I have just been fascinated by and I've started reading myself is your book, The
Hmm.
Full Body Yes. Why did you get into writing this book? What was the impetus behind it?
Sure.
Walk us through that.
Sure. I have been thinking about writing a book since I was 15 years old, since I was in ninth grade English class. My teacher, Mary Sawyer, got me turned on to writing. And over the course of the last, whatever, 30 something years, every time I would sit down to like write my big book, it wasn't time. I didn't feel it. But in December of 2019, I was driving home with my friend Soren from this event that we had done together. And he's driving, I'm in the passenger seat. He gets this funny look on his face. He looks over, he goes, the universe has told me to tell you it's time to write your book. And we both just laughed like that. And I kind of checked in, like, does it feel right? Like, yeah, that's right. It is time to write it. And by the time I had never written a book, so I hired a book coach, an editor to help me turn 100 stories into 40 stories into a nice flow, an outline. And then it was time to write my outline,
Yes.
and it was April 1st, 2020. And so, in other words, I was at home, I wasn't commuting to work. Everything had shut down around me. The world was uncertain. But I essentially traded commuting time for writing time, and a lifetime's worth of stories just flowed. It just came out of me like it was, every morning I would go do my practice under my big oak tree in the backyard here in California.
Yeah.
And then I would immediately go inside, and before email or doing anything else, I would just write for half an hour every day. And it just flowed like it was meant to be, which of course it was. And so that was my story. It all just happened the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, and what has the feedback been like for this book?
It's it's interesting on like people who read it. Here's the thing. I feel like nobody reads books anymore. Even if you give somebody a book, they're like, "Oh yeah," and then they don't read it. But among people who read it, they're like, "Oh my god, I need to talk to you about chapter 12." Like something really resonates with them. Because these are stories. Some of it is the story about me, but it's really the story about all of us, right? I try to share my experience in a really vulnerable and kind of exposed and raw way.
Yeah.
And the thing is, everything I've gone through is something that you've gone through, something that every one of us have gone through, just maybe in a different context, right? The same fears or strengths or whatever that I have are the same fears and strengths or whatever that everybody else has. So among people who read it, it's pretty powerful, really.
Yeah, and I think it's that level of vulnerability and sheer connection that does create that power and does create that impact. And just speaking of creation, I know people are dying to ask you, what was the steps that you took to create this new job opportunity for
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah,
And what do you say to people who they know what they really want, especially in their life
sure,
and their career, but they're so afraid of being able to go after that? So walk us through that
sure.
process.
Yeah, so I shared a little bit just like tactically, I just kind of started doing. I started um, doing the thing I loved, and then it turned into something real. And that's usually the advice I give is like, especially if it's narrow, like somebody wants to have my job somewhere else, like how do I become head of mindfulness at my place? My answer is start doing it, right? Are you already a meditation teacher? Oh, well, I'm trying. Okay, do that. Like every Thursday or every day, lead something, right? Because for me, I was leading something once or twice a week for 4 years before it became my job, which meant that over time, I had literally led hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions. Um, I, just became comfortable with my own work. I became an expert in my own work as a volunteer. So then when it became time, like there was an opening, I had already done it where everybody else around was like, oh, yeah, of course, Scott should do this thing. And I think it's true in whatever you're trying to do, right? Is pick something that you love, even if it's from your current role. Shape your role to the extent that you can to include more of the stuff that you love and less of the stuff that you don't love. And I get it that the further up kind of the ladder you go, the more choice you have. But for all of us, we have choices on how do we shape that role. Um, I tell a story in the book about two border guards, right? I was traveling to Ireland, and you're in the long passport line, and then you talk to the customs agent who stamps your passport, right? And I'll shorten it here, so you have to read the book for the good part of the story. But one border guard, like he was just stamping the book, right? It's like he's grouchy. He was just there to stamp the book. But another time we went through, this guy was on fire. Like he was just the happiest guy. And I don't know this for sure, but it was like he had taken it upon himself that everybody who went through his row was going to be welcomed to Ireland as if they were long lost relatives finally come home to the motherland. Now you imagine this is a choice, right? It's the same job. It's tactically the same job, but the outcome on me, like you were saying, when we light up ourselves, everybody else around us lights up, or when we dim our own lights, everybody else around us is kind of dimmed. We have this choice from no matter what role we have in life, whether it's a mother or a line worker or a CEO and everything in between. We all have the choice to light up ourselves and light up everybody else around us.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful metaphor for the responsibility and the charge for us to be responsible for the energy we bring into any space that we're in. I know a lot of people, they will classify themselves with the language of being a light worker. They bring joy and the sun and those kind of emotions where a lot of people are drawn to. But there's also folks who have that natural ability and they're often exhausted and don't think that they
Hmm.
need to protect that joy or that
Hmm.
light that within themselves. What do you
Sure.
say to people who are trying to navigate, folks always clamoring on to them because they are the
Sure.
optimistic person, they are the
Sure.
joyful individual?
Well, there's always balance and there's always boundaries, right? And it's a balance. Sometimes we can overgive. You know, it's all about capacity. So, as an example, we think compassion is all about doing for others, right? So, as an example, let's take cats. You see a stray cat, it shows up on your door. You feed it, you take care of it, you take it in your home. Great, everything's great. What about the second stray cat? Maybe. What about the 30th stray cat or the 400th stray cat? Or what if they were elephants? You know, can you take care of 400 elephants? At some point, I mean, I'm making a joke, but obviously our capacity is limited. Every single one of us, our capacity is limited. I don't have capacity to care for 400 elephants.
Right.
In the same way, I don't have capacity. If someone wants to have lunch with me and pick my brain about something, I might have capacity for one of those. I don't
Right.
have capacity for 400 of those. And so finding our boundaries, finding our limits, and saying, here's how I can serve. And also, here's what I need to do to recharge. And sometimes those two things are the same, right? If the
Right.
thing that we do as service also adds to our light,
Uh-huh.
that is magic, right?
Yes.
If the thing we do as service dims our light, ooh, we have to be very, very careful about that.
Yeah. And I think that's where the practice of discipline comes in. Because so many people think that, having a life full of mindfulness and being someone that is of empathetic, compassionate soul is just woo woo. But there's a discipline that is
Absolutely.
associated with this work, that
Totally.
is important to the bottom line of a lot of things. And you spoke earlier about this, and before I let you go, I want to make sure that I get this for our listeners here. That being purposeful in business does more financially,
That's
for
right.
your business. So, talk to us about that and what your experience has been.
Absolutely. So when we think about compassion as awareness of others, a mindset of wishing them best, and the courage to take action, it turns out there's research on this that companies who take care of all of their stakeholders, right? Their customers, their employees, and their shareholders, as well as the broader environment and context in which they live, they're actually more profitable than the ones who are just focused on profit. It's to the point where it's 14 times more profitable, 1400% more profitable than the S&P average.
Yes.
Now, you think so this is just what I say is like I don't want to be crass, but like this is how you make more money. Like this is how you build a more successful business. It's just like look, companies are just collections of humans. So it's just like in a relationship. Think about your most precious relationship, your spouse, your partner, whatever. And in the same way, if you only 100% of the time thought about yourself in that relationship,
Mhm.
is that going to be healthy? Versus if you had a balance of thinking about yourself and thinking about the other person, which one is going to be better? It's obvious, right?
Yes.
But we often are focused on ourselves, and companies are often focused on themselves. But over the long term, if you focus on the whole, our employees, our customers, and the profitability of the company, it'll be much, much better off.
Yeah, much better off. Before I let you go, Scott, I'm really curious to know, where do you see the, I guess, expansion of this work going, just in the workforce in general? A lot of people, I feel, I wish we were there.
Yeah.
Are we close? But what's your personal idea on the specs of
I
where we're
think
headed?
I think that there are more and more positions like mine that are sprouting up.
Mhm.
There are more and more little pockets of these things happening in the workplace. And at the company level, there's more discussion. Like there's a group, a conscious capitalism movement that is, related to this work. All of that is percolating, right? And it hasn't all the way taken hold yet. So it's up to each of us to nurture it, to water, to shine light on those little pockets, to participate in the little areas that happen. Because like everything else, the stuff if it doesn't get watered, it'll go back to the stuff that's just easy to do. That's what we're
That's
just
right.
trained to do. It's like, oh, let's just go make money, like whatever. Let's just focus on ourselves, whatever. It takes a little bit more work from all of us. So it's up to all of us to keep it alive. But it's right there. It's right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right there. And Scott, before I let you go, also, what is your greatest hope right now for the world
Mm.
personally? What is your greatest desire and hope?
My greatest hope and desire is that everyone would be more compassionate. starting with themselves, be more compassionate to themselves, and then with each other. With these three things: awareness of others. Are we really listening? Are we really trying to understand each other? A mindset of kindness that says, you and I, we're the same. We wear different bodies and we have different experiences, but 99% of us, we're similar. And then third is the courage to take action. Again, it's the we, the courage to take action for the we instead of just the me. If we were all more compassionate, a lot of the issues that we see when we turn on the news would fade.
Scott, I want to thank you for taking time to speak with me. These kinds of conversations are always treats, for my listeners and my viewers of this podcast. Where can we learn more about you, follow you, and also pick up your book and subscribe to any of your teachings?
Absolutely. Go to my website at scottshute.com, sign up for my newsletter there. You can find out all the other stuff that I do, from speaking to coaching to workshops. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. That's the social platform where I spend the most amount of time. And my book is called The Full Body Yes. And you can find it wherever books are sold, including the audiobook, which, funnily enough, I did myself. I recorded it with a sound engineer in my closet. It was funny.
Cool.
The sound engineer was in Atlanta, and I was in San Jose. But by Zoom, we were there together. So it's a lot of fun. Check it out.
So listen, folks, I'll have all of Scott's information at the base of this podcast. Scott, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today. Of course,
pleasure.
You can learn more about me by visiting at Plan A with Klay and also clayswilliams.com. I'm also on your favorite social media at Plan A with Klay across the board. Thanks so much for taking time to see me in today's podcast. I look forward to seeing you in our very next episode of Plan A Conversations. Peace, guys.